But everything else I'm for. What do I do?
And I don't have the legal answer on that, so I'm gonna refrain from answering that. I would think my recommendation for tonight is maybe abstain from 3.02 in a vote, if you feel comfortable with that.
I do. I want to give my support to what I want to give support to,
Okay,
though. So
and I would just, until I can get a direct answer so that we are meeting our legal requirement, I would think that that wouldn't affect anything.
okay.
So in other words, when we come to the vote, Tim Vassar, yay for 3.01, 3.03, and I'm gonna abstain from 3.02, if that meets your,
I guess so, but if we could look into that, I think that would be,
If I might suggest, let's just do them each individually then, rather than,
oh, okay. We'll do that then. We'll
3.01.
break them down, because we can do that.
that's a lot of breakdown.
Well, no, there's only
No.
3 items, 3.01, because everything would fall under 3.02 and 3.03.
we're not talking about breaking down the individual items out of the 100, 300, whatever it is, in the personnel report. What I'm suggesting is then you vote 3.01, then you vote 3.02, then you vote 3.03, and that way,
Because you can always move an item off this way it stays under consent agenda, but each individual item becomes separate,
and yet you vote yea or nay, and then,
or abstain.
and Scott can get the information gathered.
And then I'll make sure I get that information before next month's meeting.
Well, it's something I have to live with, you know.
It is.
Just-
Once again, I don't think, obviously, there's separate items there. I mean, if not knowing where it's coming from, it's hard for me to throw out like if you vote no, you vote no for it. I don't know how strong of the feeling or the item it's refraining to, so,
Pretty strong on few.
okay. How about we do this? How about, I'll restructure and then we're gonna go through each and,
That's okay. I mean,
we're gonna break them down each individually, is what I'm gonna do though. So I'm just gonna,
well,
we're
I
gonna,
understand that part.
Okay.
I get it. I mean, I understand
No, I
the
understand,
the
sure.
difference, but I'm talking about just specifically on the personnel agenda. We don't have hours to break down one by, like Todd just said, 300 names on there.
correct.
That's all I'm referring to. So it's an all or nothing proposition. That's all I get.
Okay, yes.
That's all we get.
That is correct on those. So, all I would recommend in the future is that when there's an issue like that, so-called behind the scenes listed under 300 and some items, that maybe if I could somehow, we could always pull an item if there's conversation beforehand that strongly issues are felt that way. And I'd be glad to have those conversations and then pull one of those items if we're in that situation where there's strong beliefs or feelings behind those specific cases.
I
And
thought
then also, once again, with us being 5, there's always the majority vote, obviously, towards those individual issues.
I
Yeah,
understand that
okay.
totally.
I know, I'm just reiterating for those at
and
home.
we've had discussions,
Yes.
we've had exchange, and I just strongly feel a few of things on there should not be on there.
Okay,
I think it's bad. I think it's bad. There's a few. And I put that in an email to you. You saw the email, Mr. Angel.
the email sent earlier in the week with the questions,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see anything that was, from my recollection of the email, that was that alarming that I thought was worth this piece.
I'm not gonna bring up anything
Okay,
in particular here, but,
all right,
I think some things are happening that should not be happening.
okay,
If I may suggest, why don't we vote and then have this be a discussion point at the end of the meeting?
I think
Sure.
it's a great idea.
okay.
How we're gonna
So
handle it.
we're gonna break down the consent agenda into 3 separate items. 3.01, the executive session minutes from 6:26 and the regular business meeting minutes 6:26:23. May I have a motion?
Second.
So motion by Ms. Basin, second by Mr. Smith for item 3.01. Any questions or discussions? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries 5-0. Item 3.02, personnel agenda for tonight's attached document. May I have a motion?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Basin, second by Mr. Babjack. Question or discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Abstain.
4-0 with an abstain from Mr. Vassar for the record. Item 3.03, voucher register checks, 169-108 to 169-301, checks 104-194 to 104-213, and also checks 900-960 to 900-966, and also journal entries 1449 to 1451. May I have a motion for item 3.03?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Basin, seconded by Mr. Smith. Question or discussion? All those in favor of 3.03, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries 5-0. Action items 4.01, the 2023-2024 Student Handbook Revisions and Additions. Mrs. Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. President and board members. The CPCSC administration would like to approve handbooks for the 23-24 school year. Most of the adjustments are directory corrections and/or updates to names, contacts, and basic information. The recommendation at this time is to approve, to waive the reading of the handbooks and approve handbooks with the suggested additions as shared.
As soon as I can get back up my board docs, we will move forward here. Give me a second here. Oh, we're good. Sorry about that. You've heard the recommendation of the administration to approve the handbooks, also with the waiving of the reading, and also with the additional suggested additions and adjustments. May I have a motion for item 4.01?
Yes, I would move to approve the handbooks and the recommendation and waive the formal reading of each handbook listed under action item 4.01. Second.
Motion by Mr. Smith, seconded by Mr. Babjack. Questions or discussion?
Two questions. May I ask directly to Mrs. Ramirez, or do I need to?
To Dr. Terrell, I'm sorry.
There is an addition to the elementary handbook, it was highlighted in what we received about adding an emergency drills language to the handbook. Was that something that already wasn't in the handbook? Like
This-
fire drills and things like
This
that?
was in the handbook. Instead of listing individual types of drills such as fire, tornado, we combined everything into emergency drills. So it was just semantics of.
Oh, okay.
Instead of individualizing and perhaps leaving something out, giving a collective name which would cover all of our emergency drills.
Okay, because I thought it'd be strange if it wasn't in there
Correct, it was
already.
in there. It's just the semantics of the title.
And then secondly, with the recent occurrences in collegiate sports and articles even about high school sports, is there anything in the high school handbook, athletically speaking, about hazing? I read through that again today. I could not find anything in there. Did I possibly miss it?
To have that question beforehand would have been helpful, to have the opportunity to
I just
review
read it
that.
this afternoon.
Yeah, I can't answer that question. We can get information together and bring it back to you.
You know, it may be in there. I couldn't find it.
We'll make sure we get some follow-up on that. All those in favor of 4.01, may I have them, or I'm sorry, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. 4.02, textbook and resource adoption. Mrs. Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. President and board members. The resources listed support our high school courses and the standards to which those courses align, as well as middle school's reinforcement of reading instruction that provides a community of readers in both of our middle schools. The recommendation from the administration is for the school board to approve the textbook and resources as listed for use beginning in 23-24.
You've heard the recommendation of the administration for approval of the textbook and/or resource adoption for the use beginning in this school year, 2023-2024. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Mr. Smith, second by Ms. Basin. Questions or discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion, those opposed? Motion carries 5-0. 4.03, Food and Milk Award Purchase Cooperative, Mr. Reese.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Annually, I bring before you the food and milk bids for the upcoming school year. Presented to you tonight is the same bid that was used from School to Food Purchasing Cooperative since the 2019 to 2020. The milk bid to Dairy Farmers of America, or formerly Dean Foods, and the food bid to HPS Group Purchasing Organization. With that, we recommend approval of the bid awards to DFA and HPS GFS for the year 23-24.
You've heard the recommendation. You've heard the recommendation of the administration for approval of the bid awards to DFA, formerly Dean's Foods Company, and HPS GFS for the year 2023-2024. May I have a motion?
Motion.
So moved by Mr. Vassar, seconded by Mr. Babjack. Question or discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries 5-0. 4.04, Colonel Wheeler Concession and Building Park Locker Room Bid Package. Mr. Reese.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. As part of our agreement with the interlocal agreement with the city of Crown Point, we've agreed to construct a joint concession building on the first level locker room for the Bulldog Park on the second level. Bid was conducted back in April, and with that we received bids. Tonight's the night we now approve those bids and get ready to construction contracts for the following companies. With that, we recommend approval of General Trades, Larson Davison, in the amount of $865,000, for masonry to Goff in the amount of $191,300, for roofing to Corellis Roofing in the amount of $135,792, to glass and glazing to Lazaro Companies in the amount of $28,300, flooring to Douglas Floor Covering in the amount of $132,736, for painting to Stance Painting in the amount of $23,600, for plumbing to Bloomfield Corp in the amount of $255,500, for mechanical also to Bloomfield Corp in the amount of $159,800, for electrical to Continental Electric in the amount of $213,650, excavation utilities demolition to Zeese and Sons Excavating in the amount of $248,500, and stairs, railing, ramps to Upright Ironworks in the amount of $73,000.
You've heard the recommendation of the administration for approval of the contracts just mentioned by Mr. Reese. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Mr. Babjack. Motion by Mr. Babjack, second by Ms. Bazin. Questions or discussion?
I just want to thank Dr. Terrell and the administration for their work with the city. Of course, thank the city of Crown Point as well. I'm going to abstain from this, not because I think I have to, but only because of being on the redevelopment commission to be safe. It just makes sense, but I fully support the work done here. I think it's great. Thanks.
Any other questions? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries 4-0 with an abstain from Mr. Smith. Thank you, everyone, regarding those items today. Moving on to 5.01, Superintendent's Discussion Groups. We can start with whoever would like to start regarding our redevelopment commissions.
I'll start if you'd like me to, Mr. Angel. We did not have a redevelopment meeting in Cedar Lake last month because that was Independence Day. We do have one coming up next week, though. There's been some discussion about redevelopment, and Brian had asked me about the legislator on that. Excuse me. So I did send, by Dr. Terrell's recommendation, email to Terry and never received a reply. So, which is kind of unusual for him, but I never received a reply. So I went back and studied to the premise of, do we get a vote on TIF issues in the future? And what it says, House Enrolled Act 1005, the governing body of each school corporation, which would be us, affected by a program, pass a resolution approving the program before the program may go into effect. So we would need to, any TIF issues in Cedar Lake, Crown Point, or Winfield, we would need to send our approval before it can go into effect. Does that help, Brian, when you asked me before?
It does, and thank you, Tim. And if you would, let's discuss that after the hearing again today, or the meeting. And
Okay.
share that, and I'll forward it on to city council.
Okay.
Um,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Scott, did that help for Winfield at all?
Yes,
Okay.
they even met or sent an invitation my way, but I will keep that and fill them in on that next time I'm there.
Okay.
Anything else under superintendent's discussion groups this evening? All good? Okay, item 5.02, and we have our new assignments now, so I'm glad Ms. Green helped me with this agenda, so I made sure I knew exactly how to address everyone. 5.02, Director of Grants and Assessments, Mr. Hardman.
And if I may, before we start this portion of the meeting, what I've asked our directors to do this evening is to give us an overview of the recently released iLearn scores. Kind of give us a very high view of our students, their performance, and kind of walk through that. So tonight, as we go from Mr. Hardeman all the way through, that's what they're going to be addressing in their portion of the meeting. One last thing, if you have questions, let's wait until the end, because some of those questions may end up being true not only in elementary, but in secondary, and even with our exceptional ed students as well. So if you can just hang on to those questions, and then at the end, we'll have a Q&A time and bring those back around. All right, Mr. Hardman.
Very good. Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like to just frame this, first of all, from a district perspective, looking at it from a state perspective, as well as the comparable schools that we look at when we compare ourselves. From the state perspective, Crown Point schools in passing both language arts and math, we were in the top 15% of the districts in the state of Indiana. There are approximately 292 districts, public school districts in the state. When we look at the language arts, again, we were at the top 15% of the school districts in the state. Mathematics, we were at in the top 11%. Okay, now why that is important is because the schools that we compare ourselves are within those top 15% and 11%. So when we look at this and we think about 292 schools, and we're looking at this group, okay, one of the things that we've noted in our performance when we look at it overall in all math, language arts, and English and math, overall we were in the bottom quartile when we are compared to our comparable schools, and that is something that we want to strive to improve. As we move forward with Mr. Chiquina, Mrs. Ramirez, Mrs. Pascas, they will dive into some of the areas as far as the elementary, secondary, and exceptional education areas that we've seen some positive, also challenges, and some things that we're working on. So I will turn it over to Mr. Chiquina.
Let me just do this officially. 5.03, or 5.03, Director of Elementary Education, Mr. Chiquina.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. Before I jump into the elementary overview, I just would like to say that working in Crown Point schools as a teacher and administrator for the last 12 years or so, I'm really grateful and excited for this opportunity to serve our schools and our community in this new role. As we look at our elementary data from the most recent iLearn assessment in grades 3 through 5, both our ELA and math performance far exceeded the state average. When we look at math, combining grades 3 through 5, we're right at the top 20 of those 292 public school districts in Indiana. In ELA, a little bit lower for when you combine grades 3 through 5, right around the top 30 of those total public schools. iLearn is measured in 4 categories. So there's below proficiency, approaching, at, and above proficiency. And when we look at our data at the elementary level, we have a relatively small percentage of students in that below category, which shows us that we have a large percentage of students in that approaching category who are really kind of knocking on the door of passing. So they might not be at that proficient cut score, but we are moving students from that below category to the approaching category in both reading and math. You know, iLearn data really only provides part of the story in elementary school and middle school too. But at the elementary level, only students in grades 3 through 5 are taking iLearn. All of our students in grades kindergarten through 5th grade are taking what's called an NWEA assessment. And this is a standardized assessment we give at the beginning, middle, and end of the year. It's given by, I think, close to 10,000 schools and districts internationally and nationwide. And when we look at our NWEA student growth, comparing this past year, 22-23, to the previous year, 21-22, we're seeing significant growth in both reading and math, looking at how our students are comparing to similar students nationwide and also themselves from previous years. So our growth on that assessment in both reading and math is really improving significantly. And that's a really important indicator because we believe strongly that all kids can grow and need to grow. Also with NWEA, another indicator that we look at is performance. And in most of our grade levels for reading and math, at the elementary grades, our students outperformed the previous year's cohort in that grade level at the end of the year. So another way to phrase that is at a given grade level, for instance, I'm just throwing this out there, kindergarten. Our kindergartners at the end of 2023 had higher average scores at the end of the year compared to that cohort or the kindergartners from the year before. So not only are our students growing at a faster rate, but we're performing at a higher level as well, as measured by NWEA. You know, having data is one thing, and we have a lot of it, but what's really important is that we use our data in meaningful ways to make decisions about instruction and intervention. So I'd just like to review a few areas of emphasis for this year. One, we're working on updating some of our data processes to really emphasize some procedures at the student level and the classroom and school levels. These include the way teachers and students interact with their data and set goals. Also how our school teams collaborate about data to make decisions about instruction for kind of large group, like tier 1 instruction happening in every classroom, but also making decisions at the individual student level. We're analyzing which specific state standards we might be underperforming in, so we're able to make some adjustments from that item analysis of the state standards. MTSS is another really large area of focus for us this year. That stands for multi-tiered systems of support. So we have students who may need some additional instruction or support in the area of reading or math or behavior. So this year we're implementing some new intervention programs and some progress monitoring programs to ensure that students are receiving an intervention that is really targeted to a specific skill gap. So if a student has a weakness in phonemic awareness, for example, the intervention they're receiving is targeted to address that skill gap. You know, finally, we're moving into year 2 of our comprehensive language arts curriculum, CKLA, which is based in the science of reading. And this past year was an implementation year. Teachers worked extremely hard. The research tells us that in an implementation year of a brand new curriculum, you could see some slower growth. However, CKLA sequences really deep, rich content knowledge with foundational skills, and it's designed to build cumulatively year after year upon itself. So the future is looking bright for our reading and reading performance and growth at the elementary level. You know, in closing for elementary, I just want to mention that, you know, behind all these scores are our kids and our teachers and our community. And it can be tough to measure a child's hard work or strength or a teacher's impact based on a couple tests. However, it is an important indicator. And we are really committed to having high expectations and continuing to push our students to grow to their greatest potential. And that growth is the key because we can always get better. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chiquina. 5.04, Director of Secondary Education, Mrs. Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. President and board members. I appreciate the opportunity to paint a picture of what our iLearn results look like, as well as just a quick overview of our NWEA relative to conditional growth and the percent of students who are meeting their growth goals. I'll kind of group this by combining ELA and math, then math, ELA, and then into NWEA. So that you have a summary of where we are looking in comparison to the state for middle schools relative to proficiency in both ELA and math combined. We are higher than the state's average proficiency rate, and we show an increased rate from the state anywhere from 5 to 13.2%. Our math proficiency in 22-23 is significantly higher than the state's math proficiency rate. So when we look at ours, we are anywhere from 15 to 18% higher in math specifically at the middles. Another interesting and important part in looking at our proficiency and how it has increased from 21 to 22 relative to math in comparison to the state is to show that while the state grew at a slower pace than we did, we are, of course, then outpacing the state anywhere from 5% to 9% in comparison to what the state scored in 21-22 as an overall proficiency for math versus what the state scored for this year. Again, we do appear to have achieved higher proficiency than the state. As we look at our English language arts, our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade proficiency percentages were all above the state proficiency percent, with 7th and 8th grade outperforming the state's ELA proficiency by more than 10%. So these are some areas that we really will be able to celebrate and to be able to recognize as areas of accomplishment. However, it would not, be, I think, completely transparent to not say that there are areas for us to grow in. And so as we look at growth with NWEA, which is really a great tool because we get benchmarking tools and data throughout the school year. This is data that is actionable for our teachers. And as Mr. Chikina mentioned, there is a process now that we have familiarity with NWEA that we'll be able to start goal setting with individual students, and really that's what we want to focus on, is helping each student meet their goals, which then we will hope will translate into proficiency on iLearn. So when we look at NWEA and conditional growth, our reading conditional growth was almost typical. Average conditional growth would be 50%. We are not quite there yet, but this will be a heavy focus for us at the middle schools to be able to support our students in their individual growth trajectory. Math, on the other hand, is showing high growth, and so we can see that this is reflected both through the growth in NWA, then correlating into higher proficiency on the iLearn. As we know, we have had CPM at the middle schools for approximately 5 years when we started with 6th grade, and this comprehensive curricula is resulting in high proficiency for our students. As I mentioned, we really do want to focus on the individual student, and by using NWEA, the students earn at the beginning of year what is called a RIT score. The RIT score then gives them a projection for where they should be at the end of the year, what would be attainable growth for that student. When we have our growth goal meetings, we'll be able to help monitor that. We really want to help students be empowered and to understand what their data means. Oftentimes we may hear from students that they took a test, they don't know what it means. Well, we really want them to invest in themselves, much like we are investing in them, so that they can be proud of themselves for the growth they are making, as well as to better understand the interventions and or extension they may be receiving because of their data. When we look at the growth of our students at the middle schools and how many of them met their individualized growth goal, for ELA, we see students ranging from 40 to 50% of them meeting their growth goal, and in math, we see anywhere from 79 to 82% of them meeting their individualized growth goal. So this, again, will help us start to set appropriate goals with students, and we really want to move that trajectory of ELA, as well as then maintain and continue to enhance the growth in mathematics. The nice thing that we can do with NWEA, and that is really why it's so important for us, is there is what is called an Indiana linking study. It allows us to take NWEA scores and correlate that to probability of proficiency on the iLearn assessment. So if we can monitor this throughout the year and really help both the student, the teachers, the staff, the administrators to make this a practice, we can intervene at a sooner, I'd say, time frame, as well as have a better understanding of where our students are headed and what supports they will need. As Mr. Chiquina mentioned, MTSS will be of the utmost importance to make sure that we are at tier 1 meeting needs with the teachers in the classroom of the students that they have, and then making sure we're aligning our interventions and identifying interventions when we don't have one currently to meet the needs of students. I will be very transparent in saying we have work to do, and I think that the positive is that we've got the right formula. We've got the right teachers who are very dedicated, staff and administrators. We've got wonderful families who are very supportive of their children. So now what we will be doing in terms of our action steps is our middle school administrators have met to start the process of analyzing data. They'll then take that data and they will take it back to their buildings and meet with their instructional leadership team, their department chairs. They'll meet with their professional learning community so that we have kind of this cycle of everybody being looped into the data so that everybody owns it. We will then be able to have individual meetings with teachers as needed, individual PLC meetings as needed to celebrate, to perhaps help teachers learn from one another. Another great thing that we have because of our MTSS specialists, our ELA and math specialists that we have that serve our district in the secondary space will be district PLC meetings, which we will have throughout the school year, where we want to be transparent with data. We want to share data amongst the two schools. We want to, again, support alignment and make sure that our students are having a common curricular experience. Much like at the elementary, we'll also be looking at the standards longitudinally so that we can see if we are struggling in an area year after year in terms of a standard, how are these standards being addressed in our curricula? What supplements do we need to include in our curricula as we are editing our buzz courses and or kind of just evaluating our curriculum? Another component of this will be the work of the school improvement team, is making sure that this data is not only analyzed but also interpreted by the school improvement team so that we can set goals that are based on conditional growth from NWEA as well as percent of students passing, or I should say meeting their growth goal. So we've got lots of work to do. The good thing is that we have the right people in place and we are accomplishing so much good work already that I have no doubt that we will be able to, with this data and an increased focus on it, be able to make trends in the right direction.
Thank you. Director of Exceptional Education, Mrs. Paskus.
Good evening, President Angel, members of the board. I'm pleased to report our exceptional education students tested with higher proficiency rates than the state average in all areas. So we are pleased with those results. Our science scores increased, math slightly decreased, and this is 3rd through 8th grade. English and language arts and social studies declined slightly, but looking at everything and looking at growth, our area of focus is really going to be English language arts. We have a group of kind of what we used to call bubble students in 5th, 6th, 7th grade that are approaching proficiency, and they didn't show the growth we would expect on NWEA. So we'd really like to take that group of students and see what else we might be able to offer them intervention-wise. The department will also be digging into our individual student scores and identifying what are the standards that need the most attention. I've started pulling individual student results and looking at them by disability area, amount of time spent in gen ed, what intervention their resource teacher uses, just to get a sense and see if we can find any patterns or trends. Results will be reviewed with our exceptional ed teachers and staff, and we'll continue to collaborate with our general education counterparts to address any identified gaps in our current intervention programs or strategies we use. We'll work with our teachers on reviewing how to write the IEP goals so that we're targeting the needs, and as well as the specially designed instruction, which are the kind of tactics they use to teach students that receive special ed. That's all I have. I did want to give a quick para update. I know it's off testing. Can I throw it in now, Dr.? Okay, last week on Tuesday, Wednesday, we had, open interviews for paraprofessionals. So we had 20 applicants over 2 days, and we're hoping to hire about 15 of those, so it was a success.
So let me jump in here if I may, and before we open it up for questions, I think one of the things that I hope you heard as we went through this was the reference to NWEA. And the importance with that is NWEA gives us that 3 different assessments throughout the year. So we can see where students begin, where they are in the middle, and then again at the end of this, near the end of the school year. That can really help us measure our growth. One of the challenges that we face here, and I've had this discussion with you multiple times, is the state continues to change the assessment. So right now it's iLearn. That is going to be changed yet again.
Yes.
And will become yet another assessment that will take 3 to 4 years before we can have realistic, usable data that we know is appropriate and can be repeated. And there's many other challenges that go with that as far as the standards, and now they're kind of pulling those back a little bit and giving us power standards, if you will, out of all of these other standards. The key to all of this is we need to be able to tell our story regardless of what's happening at the state level, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to use NWEA as a big part of that, but then also there's always local assessments that we use as well, both formal and informal within the classrooms. And as we go through this, one of the things that the goals that we have as cabinet that we've been discussing with our administrators is to really use that data to drive the instruction within the classrooms, to use data daily to impact each and every student within the classroom. As we continue to grow in that area, we'll continue to see a greater impact even with our students on student achievement academically as well. So with that, questions that you may have, and let me preface this with saying, I know that this information, you're hearing it tonight for the first time, and at the same time, we want to make sure that we're giving you accurate information. Some of it we may have right away. If not, we're gonna just simply say that we'll gather it and get back to you, and that's not trying to put that off or not answer your question, but we truly want to make sure that we are addressing and giving you the information that you are asking for and that you need.
Any questions for any of the directors at this time? Thank you all for sharing that information with us.
I have one question of clarification. First of all, thank all 4 of you for this data. Been asking for data for a long time, so thank you for that. And I look forward to receiving I don't want to speak for everybody. I look forward to receiving more data. Nick, you had said something in grades 3 to 5 math, and I didn't catch what you said. You said in math we were the top 20 and ELA top 30. Is that 20% or top 20 corporations?
Yeah, so in mathematics, when you combine grades 3 through 5,
Right.
we're the top 20.
Percent?
No, 20 out of
Okay, got it.
292.
Thank you.
And then in ELA, I think we're 31,
Okay.
right around top 30.
Okay, thanks.
You're
Very
welcome.
clear.
My only question is there, or do we track, I know we discussed when we had expansion of the buildings, that a lot of Crown Point growth and student population or transfers in. The students that may transfer in at 4th grade, 5th grade, middle school. So they're coming from a different school district into Crown Point. Is there any way to track the different measures between a student who maybe starts in kindergarten versus the student population that goes into middle schools? Or
You know, we have other data that we look at, those students that were with us for,
Thanks, Jim.
there's other data that we look at that identifies students that are with us for 162 days, so that we can then remove any type of transfer. And the state will be coming out with similar data regarding that, and that does go towards federal accountability. So we do try to take a look at that.
And just to clarify, you said 162 days. That's the mark where.
Yeah, and that, if you look at a 90% attendance rate, so enrolled. They have to be enrolled for 162 days.
Thank you.
The other thing I'd just Tim, you mentioned you've been asking for this data. This was just released within the last couple of weeks and was embargoed, and this is the first opportunity we've had to share the information.
Thank you all again. Appreciate it.
Okay, item 5.06, Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Angel. Just a quick update. Mr. Vassar, you had mentioned House and Rollback 1005. That's a housing residential TIF bill. It only pertains to residential TIFs.
Right.
Which is a new part. What that bill actually did was delete the school board approval for those that had the ability to do it before. They've essentially removed all the guardrails off residential TIFs, which now would allow them, or before we would not have even been allowed to have any. But with that, it completely removes your approval authority that was in there. That's the last section, the last subsection of that bill eliminated school board approval of any residential TIFs, leaving it fully in the power of the hands of the local redevelopment commission. I have that also in notes from Mr. Costerison with IASBO, and some bulleted points regarding that bill. It states that it removes the school board authority. So it does not pertain to any other TIF topic. It's only residential TIFs, where prior, if those residential TIFs were able to be held in those redevelopment commissions, then the school board had the ability to approve or deny it. That is no longer the case, and now residential TIFs can happen pretty much anywhere, and you lost your authority to do anything about it. So that's all the information I have tonight.
Matt, was there any change to the commercial TIF aspect of it, or is that still how it always has been, where we do not have a say in that as well?
Yeah, no change
So
in
no
that.
change in
No
that.
vote for any of the
All right, thank you.
commissions.
Item 5.07, Director of Communication, Mrs. Allen.
Thank you. Good evening. I left a couple of pieces of paper next to your computers. One, our ambassador program application is open through August 11th. We seem to have very good feedback from that program last year, so it's exciting. We'll be bringing that back. And then we're adding another program this year where Dr. Terrell will head out to some of our community groups to speak. So if you know anyone that has a local group in our community, Rotary, Kiwanis, et cetera. We didn't get to do State of the Schools this year because of construction and everything's so busy with Taft, so we're gonna take State of the Schools on the road and go visit the people.
Thank you. 5.08, Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Terrell.
Thank you. Brooke, before we go away from your portion of this, can you remind us of some key dates and times for opening of Taft that the board needs to be aware of and
Sure.
put on their schedules?
So the formal ribbon cutting is August 4th, and that is a RSVP kind of event, just so we can maintain a reasonable number of people for our team. That afternoon, we'll be hosting tours for our staff specifically throughout the district. We know a lot of teachers in other buildings are excited to see the construction and the progress, so we'll bring them in. September, we will have a community night where anyone in our community can take a tour at Taft. We're gonna wait until the school year has started and let things kind of settle. And I think that's September 21st from 4 to 6 p.m. It will be in our parent newsletters throughout the next couple of months as well.
Thank you, Brooke, again for that. Go ahead, Dr. Terrell.
So another thing that, going along those lines, as we have additional buildings that complete their construction process, for instance, Timothy Ball, MacArthur, as those get to that point, once they're completed at that point in time, I know we've had former teachers, we've had community members that aren't associated with the schools currently indicate that they'd really love that opportunity to be able to tour the buildings being there. So we will keep that in mind, and as those come off the construction process and to where they're completed, we'll continue to do that as well. Just a couple other things. Want to draw special attention tonight to our administrative team here in the district. Today we just completed our third session in our summer leadership series, which has been a great opportunity for us to get together as administrative team, really work on some leadership skill development. But the bigger piece of it is really that relationship piece and being able to come together, whether you're an elementary teacher or principal, you're at the secondary level, you're one of our support services directors, to be able to work together and really form that teamwork there. So I appreciate our administrators being willing to do that, participate openly. We've got some really talented and creative comical comedians that I guess we could say, including Mr. Hardman himself. So we appreciate them, though, and the work that they have done there. One other thing I just want to kind of put on your radar for the August meeting, if you would, make sure bring your calendars with you. I'd like to work on scheduling a date for our fall retreat. Want to get that on the books. I know that's something we've talked about for the last couple of years, and fall just seems to get really busy. But I think it's important we do so. Want to really work on a few key things with that, establishing board goals. We'll have some areas outlined that we'd like for the board to come to agreement on some goals that we can look at that are measurable and kind of help drive. And then as we establish those, really use those moving forward with agendas, moving forward with initiatives throughout our district to really hang our hat on as we move forward with that as well.
Thank you, Dr. Terrell. Item 6.01, other business of the board. Anyone have anything they'd like to discuss that wasn't on the agenda tonight?
Yes, Dr. Terrell, to your knowledge, do we have any contracts with Crown Point Counseling?
Yes, we do.
Okay, I'm asking that in regard to a recent article in the newspaper.
Yes.
Just giving you a heads up in case you didn't read that.
We're aware of it, and
Okay.
we feel like the services that are being provided to our schools and our students at this time are such that, without going into things that I shouldn't,
Yeah.
I feel like we're gonna be able to still utilize the services needed for our kids.
Thank you. Any other items, other school business? Make sure we get, there's events obviously with the ribbon cutting. Are we RSVPing Diana to you, Brooke, for that one? So hopefully everybody can make that one. Obviously a big endeavor here in their school community. So with that, I'll move on to item 7.01, board statements of appreciation and recognition. And we'll start at the end with Mr. Vasher, if you have any this evening.
I'd like to thank the custodial staffs at all their buildings. I know this is a rush for them to get everything completed. You know, their work is never really noticed until it's shoddy, and then it gets noticed. I don't think that's the case in Crown Point, and I just wanted to tell them how much they are appreciated in what they do. They work long hours to get buildings ready for lots of people and keep them that way, so thanks to them.
Thank you, Mr. Vasher. Ms. Bazin, anything this evening?
Yeah, I just wanted to recognize, and I'm not even sure who it is in particular who posts on behalf of each of our schools, but I've really enjoyed, I follow them all on Facebook, all of our buildings, and I've gotten to see a lot of things posted over the summer to where I wonder if these buildings ever even stop. Like, I don't think that folks are really leaving for the summer. So I've seen wonderful posts all summer long. I know Eisenhower is posting by grade level. I've seen MacArthur has had specials on various staff that they've posted. Our new principal at Timothy Ball, Mr. Eckert, has posted. He did a little video. So I very much appreciate that. It seems like, while I think folks should definitely have some summertime to relax, I think everyone has continued to push forward and work hard to get everything ready for our students. So kudos to whoever exactly is in charge of those things. They are not going unnoticed, and they definitely kind of bring together a really good community feel. So I've enjoyed keeping up with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Babjack?
I'd just like to say thank you to Brooke for all the work that you're doing with the communications, especially the newsletter that just came out. I've had a lot of people comment on it. I myself actually sat down and read the entire thing, which I'll have to admit is kind of rare. So it's very well laid out and so much better than anything we've had as far as communication in the form of a newsletter in years past. So thank you for that.
Mr. Smith?
I was gonna echo Mr. Babjack's comments, so we are CP magazine and how well done it is. So well done, Brooke, to you and your team, and that's it for tonight.
I would just like to thank those that were involved in the original agreement with Bulldog Park, now that we've added on now with the concession building and our storage unit being added. There was individuals that no longer serve in their certain areas that were very vital in that, including former board members here, and then also Mary Uran and also Councilman Bob Clemens. So just want to make sure that as we move forward with the rest of that to get that project completed, that those individuals were noted as far as very important. I would include Mr. Warney's name in that as far as being the board president at the time that agreement was put in place. So that is all I have. So if nothing else, 8.01, I will look for a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Babjack, second by Ms. Basin. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries 5-0. Thank you.